Hockey history, from its indigenous roots to the birth of the NHL. It is believed that a group of indigenous people known as Mi'kmaq were seen playing a form of ice hockey way back in the 1600s in Nova Scotia, Canada. Indigenous people are credited by many with inventing hockey, yet history shows that their acceptance in the sport has been slow and painful. Hockey has had its share of highs and lows since its creation. Expansion, folding of teams, racism are just to name a few. This article will explore the history of hockey from its indigenous roots right up to the birth of the NHL. Ricket. Ice hockey, or ricket as the Mi'kmaqs referred to it as, used a type of puck and curved stick. In Nova Scotia in the 1600s, Europeans observed the group of indigenous people playing this odd game. The puck was originally a frozen rolled apple, then they were carved from cherry wood, before the Euro-Americans eventually manufactured pucks out of the rubber they imported. Groundbreaker. Fred Sasakamoose is one of the first indigenous players to crack an NHL lineup. The former Chicago Blackhawks star made his debut in 1953, and at 18, he had his eyes opened up for him, exposing the real NHL. "We don't allow you to talk your language," said Sasakamoose in an interview at age 84 with the New York Times. Sasakamoose was asked to speak in his native Cree in his first interview. He obliged the request, which was more than just awkward, but he made it to the big leagues, and this was the start of the norm. Today there remains still a debate over who the official first indigenous hockey player in the NHL was, and this is due to the folding of leagues and teams and loss of accurate records. Racism, inequality, and disgusting treatment at the hands of white players was the norm for the few indigenous players lucky and brave enough to survive the climb up the ranks. Even though the indigenous are essentially known for inventing hockey, it is the NHL that most identify with the sport. Métis, First Nations people, and Inuit comprise almost 5% of Canada's population. Over 7,500 players have laced up their skates in the 100-year history of the NHL. 5,100 of them are Canadian, and only 80 Indigenous players on record. The National Hockey League. The National Hockey League was officially started up in 1917. The NHA, the National Hockey Association, originated in 1909 before dissolving and becoming reborn as the NHL. Several leagues, including the NHA before its demise, competed for the Stanley Cup until 1926. That was a rough time for the other leagues, which either folded or merged, leaving the NHL as the only league standing to compete for the Stanley Cup. Originally, the league was truly the National Hockey League, as it began with only 4 teams, all Canadian. The Montreal Canadiens, Montreal Wanderers, Toronto Arenas, and Ottawa Senators. After a fire burned down the Montreal Arena in 1918, the Wanderers were forced to stop all operations and were replaced by the Quebec Bulldogs in 1919. The Boston Bruins were the first US-based team to enter the NHL, debuting in 1924. Almost 2 decades later, expansion included the Detroit Red Wings, Toronto Maple Leafs, New York Rangers, and Chicago Blackhawks. The Original Six. The Original Six is a term that famously refers to the first 6 teams in the NHL to compete for the Stanley Cup. From 1942 to 1967 will forever be known as the Original Six era. The Montreal Canadiens, Toronto Maple Leafs, Boston Bruins, Chicago Blackhawks, Detroit Red Wings, and the New York Rangers comprise the most famous hockey teams in the world. Bobby Hull, Morris the Rocket Richard, Bobby Orr, and Darryl Styler were the shining stars of the NHL in the heydays of the original Six era. Richard would set records that would not be broken for decades and or had an elegance on the ice as a smooth skating defenseman. Expansion. After the Edmonton Oilers gave us arguably the greatest hockey player of all time, Wayne Gretzky, the NHL saw the value of marketing itself and its stars, and the US was a candy land waiting to be tapped into. Labor stoppages, expansion, and folding of franchises would be the story of the NHL for decades. But along the way, we were treated to Mario Lemieux, Sidney Crosby, Alexander Ovechkin. Hockey today. The NHL has made great strides in its journey to becoming a global game that includes everyone. June is National Indigenous History Month in Canada. Hockey is thriving in Indigenous communities nationwide on all levels. There are now annual events that are steeped deep in competition, such as the National Hockey Championships that attracts the elite teenage hockey stars. The NHL celebrates diversity and supports the fight against racism and social injustice. Retroactively, the league honors past heroes such as Willie O'Ree, the first black player in the NHL, as well as lending financial support to Indigenous communities and their causes. Women are in the front offices, and the NHL is being used to back the formation of a professional ice hockey league for women. Hockey has grown from a game with wooden sticks and frozen apples to an internationally recognized sport that includes all races, creeds, genders, and now even has its first openly gay hockey player. Indeed, hockey has come a long way and still has even further to go. One thing is for certain, no matter who you say invented hockey, and no matter who is playing it, hockey is now and forever for everyone.